Hello and welcome to Rauta's Assassin's Creed Shadows stream. Let's continue where left off yesterday. Another stream today for maybe an hour or so. Given that now with all the Christmas stuff happening and all that stuff, a little bit later wake up call tomorrow morning. So towards the end we go with the game. Hello, dear. Yeah, I just started like a minute ago. Usually at this hour I'm already like finishing up.
Describe metal and the metal scene to people that aren't a part of / don't know anything about it.
Dixon, that's an awesome question because I every now and then encounter people in that sense, but usually I don't really bother that much, you know, going into details with metal and stuff. It actually depends to who I'm talking to and in which manner. You know, if I expect that this someone might be just asking me about this stuff because he or she feels that metal is something, you know, very problematic or whatever, I probably steer it through like marginal art, like, you know, like with any kind of you know. All right, let me see in the game. So what I'm saying here is I try to think it through like any kind of a marginal art, you know, be it art movies or marginal style of, you know, paintings, whatever. So it really depends. But if I feel like this person is not judgmental by the very default with the with this question, then I might be more kind of open about it, how to explain metal music, metal scene, metal people, and all that stuff. But yeah, it's really context dependent.
Evening, Rauta and all.
Hello, Rich Original. Welcome to the stream. But it's a good question in so many ways because, you know, so many people have prejudice. I mean, basically, we all have prejudice about one thing or two in our lives. So obviously, metal music tends to be seen, you know, quite negatively. And of course, people might be thinking about, I mean, we're not even in the 80s anymore, of course, but people still might be thinking it through like, okay, it's this kind of a, you know, Satan worshipping or whatever. So it really depends what we want to tell these people about.
I think there's also a difference depending on what genre of metal one tries to explain.
Yes, Tia, definitely. Hello, Black Widow. I mean, it for sure depends whether we're talking about metal in general or whether we're talking about like things like heavy metal, black metal, death metal, power metal, metalcore. So all things considered, it is very, very, very different. Very different world. Alright, combat game, so I'm gonna take it a little bit. Combat happens, so I'm gonna take it a little bit easy until I'm able to deal with the situation.
What song or album are you currently listening to?
I'm not listening to music because I am playing the game, and obviously when I play the game, I mean with most games, I enjoy the music the game is providing. There are exceptions, you know, like for example, if I'm playing games like Civilization or some other strategy games. But when I was driving home, I was actually listening to Morbid Angel's Altar of Madness. I was trying to think so hard before heading home, like what were the album candidates of the year for me? Like I could revisit them before the end of the year in order to make my top 10 list. But in the car, I was like, I cannot really remember which albums I have on my list at home, which need to be re-listened. So I was like, okay, I'll get back to that list when I'm back home. But so for the car, I'm in letter M, listening to albums in my own collection. So I figured I might as well keep up going with that list. So yeah, that's why I decided, like, let's go Morbid Angel. Like, if I listen to it now in the car or at the gym, you know, it's one album less to listen to at home. So kind of serving the purpose. But getting back to the question of Dixon, I don't want to leave my answer just like that. So what I'm thinking is, like, in general, if I don't assume the person is being judgmental and all about the questions and everything, like if I can be just, you know, explaining the metal in general and not specifically about some kind of you know, underground thing or black metal in particular or whatever, I mean, I probably will just, you know, explain how I feel about it. Meaning, like, yeah, it's this very, very marginal kind of a thing, and I often explain how I feel it's very, very much a part of, you know, kind of a rebellious minds. Like for me, for instance, I always consider metal music still being in big part kind of a part of these rebellious ways of living the life. Hello, Rutgers Jussi. And as such, for me, it's easy to, you know, explain metal music so that it's much more than just the music. but I try to keep the kind of a neutral approach to it. So I don't want to, you know, exaggerate things too much. So, I don't want to make them think stupid things which are not real. So for me, metal music, of course, is it's much more than just music. Of course, music always first, because without music, a lot of those things are not exactly very interesting, or at least they won't have the same meaning. So music is always first. But outside music, I mean, that's kind of equally important, because for me it is just not listening just albums and that's it. But it's about understanding the artists and being interested in what goes in their heads and reading lyrics. Not so much anymore, but still, and understanding the whole thing. And of course meeting different people from the scene, various parts of the world, discussing bands, ideas, ideals even. So yeah, it's a wholesome thing really. And of course, when I wanna explain metal music to someone who doesn't understand any of it, I try to feed their curiosity by explaining how it is much more than just simple riffs or boneheaded, moshing. But I try to make it in a neutral way. I'm not trying to sell them anything like, hey, I'm listening to metal because it's so great and so should you. But more like tell them what's the whole big deal about. Because obviously it is indeed much more than just music. So I guess that would be my long answer to this whole thing. I hope it hope it makes sense what I'm talking about here, but you never know. All right, that should be my next point where to go in this game.
Best
But yeah,
album of the
someone
year
who
top
doesn't
5.
understand a single
What
thing.
is best interview in your opinion in this year?
Best album of the year or top five? Well, my top 10 review list will be out early January. I won't discuss the best albums yet. But the best interview this year, it's kind of like, hey, what's your favorite kid? I don't like to, really that much choose what is my favorite um, interview so much, because it's always like I mentioned, what is your favorite pet? If you have like 10 dogs, which one would be your favorite dog? But of course, some interviews are more memorable than others. And at this point of the year, I even have
What
a little bit
song brings
hard
you in a
time.
good mood?
What songs bring you in a good mood? Well, a lot of Slayer songs for sure. Um, and of course, some Pink Floyd songs. And then again, there are lots of individual songs from all kind of artists that can bring a good mood to my mind. A lot of Battery would be on that list. But also, I would say
Three
there are
favorite
probably lots of
movies.
lots of non-metallic favorite things that can really put a smile on my face. But maybe one of my best favorite interviews this year would Necromantia one was really really special to me. I think it was so eye-opening in a way, and also you know very in depth too. I would say. I would have to see the list again for myself to even remember all the bands I interviewed this year, because there were lots. A few at Steelfest, a few at Turku Saatanalle, mm,
Hello
some
everyone.
some at Acronym Arts. Hello, Freedom Rock. So I did so many interviews this year. It's impossible for me to very quickly say which one would be my top highlight. Now for this what you asked, the kind of a newcomer
Hello at Freedom Frog.
of the year. Well, I really can't be sure what would be. I guess it also depends if newcomer is something that came up with the first album or if it's something that I found as a new one. Uh, but I think this band called Taer, T-A with dots and R, which is actually one of my albums of the year candidate. Um, that would be one of the best newcomers. Or Malefic Throne, which has actually three veteran members of the scene and made their debut album. I mean, there is fuck, I can never remember the surname properly pronounced, but it's this Gene. What the fuck his name? Anyway, he used to be in Angel Corpse. Sorry, Gene something. And there is Steve Tucker from previously Morbid Angel, and John Longstreth, who also used to play in. John Longstreth used to play also in Angel Corpse and Origin, my favorite drummer. So that trio, Steve Tucker, this Gene, whatever, and John Longstreth made this new band called Malefic Throne. And that is a really, really strong contender in my album of the year list. So I guess they count as newcomer because it's their debut album, even if the band guys are, you know, quite old. So that would be a really good candidate for that. But I will do my album of the year list early January. The plan is to get it out on the very first Sunday of 2026. I am not 100% sure if I can make it, but most likely I will, because the list is pretty much already planned. Now I'm just trying to figure out, like, hey, which 15 albums or so will be in the top 10. This year hasn't been very good in my opinion. So there are like lots of albums that are good but not exactly great.
Rauta plays, Yon Timo Salamurai and Himo.
Yes, Supernaturali, that's exactly how it is. You got me red-handed with that idea. But yeah, this year has been, I guess, in a way, the hardest year for me in many, many years to pick up top 10 albums. It's not because this year doesn't have any good albums, but it's more like this year doesn't have any great albums. Like, I don't have a single album from year 2025 that I would feel is like, you know, 9 out of 10 or better. I have quite a few eights, so this year has been kind of a, you know, steady in quality, which is of course good stuff, but it's not great. So I've been kind of disappointed in this year in the sense of like, so many previous years have been so much better. Yeah, plenty of good albums, but great ones, not for me unfortunately. But at least I'm able to compile that kind of a top 10 list, so means it's not useless here. But yeah, I don't think my list will be very interesting for top 10 for 2025, but I am not to judge that, so I guess you other people will see about it when it's
Here's
out.
my personal opinion about Black Braid as a person. The new album is very good. I thought the Satanic North debut was okay. I think
Well,
pop.
well, that Satanic North album was for me something like 3 out of 5, 6 out of 10. I mean, it's not bad album, but hardly anything, special. For me, it's just another, melodic black metal album made by people who are not even that much into black metal. So feels to me it's more like you know more like of these therapeutical project.
Was really bad for metal.
Can I remember a year that was really bad for metal? No, not really, because each and every year has always had a lot of good or decent albums. So I cannot really remember a year when I felt like, metal let me down or anything like that. This step, which means this kind of a firearm, is funny in this context because it's actually Finnish. It's Finnish first name for a guy usually in their 50s or so. But usually, most of the years, as long as I've been making these top 10 lists, which means something like probably 20 years now, always been, great albums. Maybe I'm getting pickier by the year, or maybe this year just I haven't yet found the really good ones. Because I'm sure that there are lots of those. I'm sure that.
Exaltation of Cruelty. I really enjoyed it.
But Exaltation of Cruelty was 2024 album. Came very, very late in 24. So it couldn't have been, it kind of fell off from a lot of those best of best of 2024 lists because it came out so late in 2024. And what always annoys me, there are always lots of these lists, being compiled like already like in March, November, which are supposed to be then like the best albums of the year. How on earth you can do the best of the year albums in fucking November, where there are like many weeks still left? And you're curiously enough, quite a few contenders for my album of the year list came in December, when some of those lists for when some of these albums haven't been even out. I even noticed one of these biggest metal medias in Finland. I think they put out the list for year 2025 early December or late November. And guess what? For example, Mutilation's new album is going to be out very late in December this year. So a lot of these albums are gonna be released after these lists are done. I'll give a very good example which I have already heard, and it's this latest Blood Red Throne album that came out like 9th of December, something like that. And I was just listening to it yesterday and again today, and I think it's a very strong contender for year 2025 in terms of one of the best albums of the year. I think it's a very good death metal album, and so albums like that are gonna be, missing from these lists just because they were released in December. So Exaltation of Cruelty came out around maybe 20th, something like that.
You always recommend and bring light to some really good music and artists that it have otherwise never heard of, so that's most important too.
Thank you, Rich. That's what I try to do because I hate when people are just talking about the bigger artists or whatever, and then they're like, missing out a lot of interesting underground acts. Doesn't matter what the genre is, because obviously everybody.
Sacrosanct Demonopathy was a good one. That was 2025 if I'm correct.
Can't say I have heard that Sacrosanct Demonopathy album. But either way, my point here is and remains the same. Everybody is gonna miss some important albums every year because there's just so many albums nobody has time to listen to. So even the best of the best media lists for whatever are gonna miss out because, like, if you just open Metal Archives and look for upcoming albums, and you might see something like 50 albums coming out on a single day. So obviously nobody has the time to listen to them all. So it's very easy to just miss a lot of albums because so much albums are put out and so much of that stuff is being honestly rubbish. But that also means when you start missing out on these lesser known bands.
Newest album. I recommend it if you ever have time.
I have heard the War Moon Lord's new album, and it was actually and still is one of the contenders for my albums of the year list. But I can honestly say it's probably not gonna make it. I mean, it's a good album, but it's still not that good for me anyway. But yeah, it's definitely worth checking out. So like I said, this year has been very steady in my opinion.
Behemoth album, grinning face with smiling eyes.
Well, the new Behemoth album was actually pretty good, but didn't make to my best of the albums list. I had actually forgotten it, even though I remember when I was checking out the latest music videos when it was very fresh. I remember actually liking them, but because the album didn't come for review, I kind of forgot it very soon after I was through those single songs. But if it had been good, I wouldn't have forgotten it. But I didn't even mark it down on my list after I had heard it. And every year, how I start compiling my list for these album of the year contenders, I write it down if the album is 8 out of 10 or better. because otherwise I would forget whatever was going on early months of the year. I mean, people are more likely to remember the uh, the later albums. That's just how human mind works. That's why some of those what they want for Oscar nominations, the Academy Awards. That's why they prefer to go out with a little bit later in the year, like come November or whatever December, and if you're having movie out in November or December, people are more likely gonna remember that movie versus if you put out your albums, say in January or February. So if you want to be tactical about it, make sure that your album or movie is coming out a little bit late in the party, but not too late. Because if you put it out in December, most likely people are gonna miss it out because they're making these lists already. But if you put it too early, people are also gonna miss them. So I guess the sweet spot for releasing an album in sense that you wanna be on those lists would be probably September through November, and then you're likely that you will end up on those lists, assuming of course that your stuff is good. Maybe even November is too late, but anything from August to October and you're pretty good to go, because then people will have had the time.
With some music like bring back good times, maybe when you're a young teenager or something.
Gyrolamp, by very nature, I'm not really nostalgic person, which is good in the sense that I won't be listening just old stuff out of nostalgia, nor I will be giving extra points for some older albums just because, well, they would be nostalgic. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes, of course, I feel nostalgic about old days, but just because back then we were young, innocent, we didn't know as much, so things were more mystical. I mean, when you were young, everything you heard was always new, it was fascinating, it was something that you were there for the first time. Even when you learned about new black metal bands or death metal bands, doesn't matter. Things were just wow. Obviously, you don't get that feeling when you're in your 30s, let alone 40s, so much. So, in that sense, sometimes it's kind of easy to be a little bit nostalgic about things, how things are nowadays, or versus what they were. But when it comes to music, I never considered, they made better music back in the days. No, they did not. I mean, certain absolute classics, of course, happened when they happened, but that's more because like in the 90s, black metal was still very new, even though technically speaking, second wave.
I saw you criticize some old Seder Icon albums, and I also thought they were overhyped, but we were definitely in a M.
Yeah, Gyrolamp, that's exactly the truth. It's easier to be non-biased when nostalgia is not, really doing its shots, so to say. Because when you are so much involved in nostalgia, it's easy to just call that everything new is stupid and dumb and not as good as back in the golden days. I mean, of course, back in the golden days, for example, in black metal, well, lots of great albums were done in the 90s, because like I said, those were the early days. And same thing can be said about death metal. A lot of good death metal happened in late 80s to early 90s. So it's easy to be very nostalgic in that sense about those days. Or what about thrash metal? Thrash metal pretty much bloomed in the 80s. And nowadays you can say, oh, every other thrash metal after 1989 or whatever, it's not that good. But I mean, that would be foolish because if you just think about the old days, you're gonna miss out on so much good stuff that is coming nowadays. So it's always very important to be fresh with your opinions and not just.
Also, recording and production is so much better these days. There's so much more possible emote. Maybe there's something to the guys being younger and making their strongest work.
Well, Darrell, you're definitely right about that. Sometimes those young kids, they're so passionate about music, so they don't worry about things like being technical and is this groundbreaking. They're just making new music,
Black
so
metal
they're more like,
amazing, but that's probably not true for all of them.
well, exactly, Darrell, we're on the same page. It's definitely think they're not overthinking about the stuff, so they are just doing new music with passion, not thinking about, hey, can we put this and that there? Does it say sound fake or posure or whatever silly things you might think about when you're more experienced. And also when bands get a little bit more experienced, sometimes they like, we have to be groundbreaking. And that's also when sometimes so-called third album is the harder one, because first bands make the first album with passion. They're like, okay, let's make this first album, let's put our all the first ideas, initial ideas on this and that album, and then you put it out, and the result is something like Kill 'Em All by Metallica or Dark Medieval Times by Satyricon. And they're like, okay, now we can better it, let's make it more honed, let's put some better ideas on the second album, which in which case you get albums like Ride the Lightning or Shadow Throne. Sometimes the second album pales in comparison to the first one because the second album is more like leftovers from the first album. So it's still kind of a fresh, but it's not exactly the first time anymore. It's not your virgin trip. Now come third album, which is a common saying among review people. Now, third album is like, okay, we already made two albums with the same style. Now we have to reinvent ourselves. Now we have to shed the skin. Now we have to be something different. And that's where so many bands go south. Say they make first good death metal album A and B. And then comes the C time, and they're like, okay, we cannot do basic death metal album anymore. We have to be a little bit more progressive or technical, or we have to incorporate some other elements from other genre. And that's often where things go south. Now, of course, there are bands, like Slayer, for instance. They made some first Show No Mercy, which is more, I guess, in a way, pretty heavy metal than pure thrash. Then they make Hell Awaits, which is definitely more thrash. And then they do Rain in Blood, which became their, in my opinion, top album. Also, I could say same thing about Metallica. Master of Puppets is even better than two previous ones, or at least not worse than Ride the Lightning. Same thing could be said once again with Satyricon, Nemesis Divina. But if you think about Dark Throne, they made first a death metal album and then they figured out we actually gonna play, black metal. So their second album is actually like almost a restart. And by their second and third album, they would be with the second and third album, actually, Dark Throne was actually honing the style even further. So it's not always the third album is challenging. Sometimes it might be the best one. Sometimes it is exactly the same as number one and two. But yeah, obviously there are no written rules how it works. Different bands do different solutions. But I agree, the first albums, the initial ones, are always more just let's go straight forward. And only after that, the band start more like, hey, we have to experiment more. We have to see if we can use this or that. So yeah, things kind of can go so many ways. And of course, this gonna go for.
I was hopeful Old Man's Child would release the new album this year. I'm sure it's worth the wait.
Yeah, I think New Old Man's Child will take some time because, they're now just back and making the first few shows after the comeback, and it might take some time before they're ready to do a new album. But also something Rich mentioned there about production. Yeah, nowadays production values are so much better. So nowadays even a band with relatively low budget can do quite a bit more powerful sounding album than back in the days. The band's good because now everybody and their aunts have
I would
some
actually
kind of
argue
a.
that Brony truly reached their strongest refined black metal sound on Panzerfaust album, which is like their fourth album.
Yeah, Gerald and Panzerfaust is actually quite late of an album, but the funny thing is, that's where they did their Celtic Frosting, because basically Panzerfaust is just raw version of Celtic Frost. For me, it's the third best Dark Throne album, straight after Transylvanian Hunger and Under a Funeral Moon, and it's not so much a step, to a different style as opposed to say Total Death after those three raw end of albums. It's really
It
fucking
always
great
feels
albums,
like a good quality production, especially if the band is good without it.
and I think the Panzerfaust is actually one of the best black metal albums of all time. But I still like uh, you know uh, Transylvanian Hunger and Under a Funeral Moon even more. So those three albums made by a single band within say 5 years, it kind of proves that Dark Throne is was the best black metal band of all time. At least in my books, it's raw, fierce, grim, dark, evil, which is a lot of what bands are not doing. But these are always, of course, matters of taste, and some people are like, "Hey, Dark Throne doesn't really mean a thing to me." So yeah. But about in general, these different albums. I mean, some bands really bloom after like 3, 4 albums even. So there is no single path the bands can do. And about getting production better, um, you know, it really depends what kind of understanding these bands have. So it's not always so straightforward. But at least these days, the bands can be, you know, so much more professional with the production than back in the days. Although I have to actually check out something from the game. And that was a nope. And now I'm out of scouts in this game. Alright, let me see what the time is. But those are all really good questions. I have to be going soon. Maybe 15 more minutes and then I have to bounce. Because I still have work tomorrow. I guess I will do the rest of the game a little bit traveling and getting these viewpoints. Because I will need them anyway later on. But yeah, it's a good topic to talk about, like what makes certain bands, certain eras really good, and how these things are being uh, defined. Because there is no, you know, unanimous opinion about what is the best era, what is the best sound, what is the best this and that. And I can only say that collectively, in general, being open-minded and not just stuck with.
Fans used to say that the new black metal bands try hard to be atmospheric, and in doing so they actually take away the natural atmosphere.
I agree with that, Gyro Lamps, because I think going actually atmospheric so much is too much of a die-hard thing. A lot of atmospheric black metal don't really they don't really sound raw, dark, evil. They're just like, hey, let's try to build some kind of ambience with the music. And I'm like, hey, how is this supposed to be extreme when you're just trying to do something like a fucking decoration with your music? Like, I mean, Versum basically pinnacled the atmospheric black metal, but most bands don't fucking understand how to do proper atmospheric black metal. Witcher is a good example in that they don't really have, good songs, but they do have good atmosphere in the music. But there is nothing really extreme in Witcher's music. For me, it's kind of easy to listen to it, and I kind of like them. But it's not the kind of stuff that I feel like, hey, I should be listening to some Witcher, because the problem with the band is it's just too much about, well, atmosphere, but it for sure isn't extreme metal per se. And what is a black metal as a genre if not extreme metal genre? So in that sense, which her has kind of a failed. I mean, if they don't even try to sound like an extreme metal thing, then you could say, yeah, they do a fine job in what they do. But once again, if we're talking about an extreme metal genre, and you're like, hey, can you recommend me something extreme metal?
I feel like it would be good as a game soundtrack like Skyrim.
Well, I have to agree with you, Freedom Frog. Not that I feel like metal music soundtrack would be very fitting for Skyrim, but apart from that, yeah, I agree. That's basically what Witcher is doing, in my opinion, because it's really this kind of a soundtrack thing, and in that sense, they have succeeded. Like I said, it's a nice atmosphere, and it's in a way very soothing to listen to. But still, I'm more like guessing. Why would I listen to black metal if I'm looking something soothing? So it's more like if I want to listen to something soothing, I probably go for ambience or soundtrack.
And it is
So
very boring in concerts.
yeah, atmospheric black metal rarely works in concerts. I'll give you a good example of that with Uada.
Jason is interesting. I don't think he was try hard either. He said he improvised the tracks on the spot in studio.
Yeah, and Burzum just has this understanding how to make fucking great riffs, to be honest. And some
Hello,
people
Rauta
just
from
have it.
Chile wine glass.
Hello, Antofagasta. But what Black Widow said about atmospheric black metal being boring at gigs, I fully agree. When I said, oh, damn, this is loud now. This particular music. So when I see Uada, was it like last year at the Inferno Fest? And man, it was boring. The whole concert. I mean, I didn't watch it until the very end, but as much as I saw it, I felt like the whole gig was just an intro. And at first I was thinking, okay, this intro takes quite a bit of time, and I was like, when are they gonna start? And then I realized they actually played already a couple of tracks, and I was like, really? I didn't realize Uada was this boring live, because basically nothing interesting was happening on stage, and the music for sure wasn't interesting. So that was like a kind of like a peak example how you make boring live music. I mean, probably would have worked in some other context just fine, but in live context, very boring live, and then having very boring songs. I mean, you're not gonna win with that kind of a combo. Yet I obviously know that there are people
Maybe
who
those bands
who
even
love
played in a
or
sit-down theater
like
type venue environment with
you.
big screen behind, etc.
Yeah, I think Cherry Lamp, you're right.
Would maybe only work in an orchestral context.
Maybe, and maybe with if it was more like some visual things. Like I remember some 20 years ago when I saw Enslaved at the Inferno, I remember they had lots of visuals, kind of artsy-fartsy videos. But mind you, 20 years ago, that kind of thing wasn't too common. Nowadays, a lot of bands come up come up with some kind of
あの達
visual
人のもとへ
takes.
助けを送ろう。
So a lot of bands, create visuals for their live settings and
I
all
was
that
talking
stuff.
to some friends about good albums and I mentioned Death from Above. A lot of the lyrics just sound like me talking.
Freedom Frog, that's a great compliment coming from
Falling
you.
asleep at you at a gig, slept for maybe 20 minutes and I'm pretty sure the same damn song was still playing Grinning Face with Big Eyes. It
Yeah,
resonated
the
with me. Yeah, for example, I'm hyped up after a good band and then some atmospheric band starts. That sucks. My mood will drop.
yeah, Black Widow, I hear you. I totally agree. And Freedom Frog, I'm glad that those lyrics make sense to you and you can resonate with that. I don't even expect people to, read those lyrics. But of course, I write them in the sense that I hope some people will read those lyrics and understand what I'm after with my mindset.
Magic is so fitting for a community that often focuses on spirituality.
Well, that's what Anti Magic is all about. Those lyrics are clearly like giving a middle finger to those bands that try to be so mysterious, so magical, like as if those band members had some, I don't know, spells, conjurations, and all that shit with their daily lives. It's actually, there's one mocking thing even about one friend of mine who I won't be mentioning, but I know this friend. He plays in a black metal band, a good one too. But I remember reading that he got so deep into a cult that actually destroyed his, well, they were not married, but for the sake of conversation, destroyed their marriage. I mean, they separated, and partial of that reason, what I heard was that this person was so deeply in into a cult. Now, I don't disrespect occult as such, but the irony is this: it's not like this guy is well succeeded in life in terms of work. I mean, no matter what kind of spells or magic you handle, but if you're still working, I don't know, in some kind of a warehouse. So now, how did the magic help you out in your life if it ruined your relationship, and did it make you a powerful person, you know, in art or work, whatever? And I'm not measuring really. Hello, Macabre. I'm not really measuring people how they do
It's
at
all
work.
nonsense. I like it as symbolism but nothing more.
Yeah, exactly, Freedom Frog. That's the point, really. So yeah, indeed, I kind of I have this. I wouldn't call it loathing, but I have this problem with people who try to make these things very mysterious, as if they were suddenly better people because they decided to read on magic or whatever, and they are not very keen You know, they don't take it lightly if you joke about their, um, you know, magic or occult. It's almost like they lost their sense of humor when things like that are being talked about. So those lyrics are, in a way, criticizing these things like, so you're so very magical and mysterious with your
Suddenly
powers.
the wife is a serial killer rolling on the floor laughing.
Well, I happen to know the wife too in this given. She's also a friend of mine. And the funny thing is, they still play in the same band. So it's not like they're not
People
friends
believe
anymore,
what
but
they want to believe, huh?
Ritz exactly. And when people are so blindly, believing all kind of nonsense, uh, it makes me, question their sensibility. I mean, say if you have a black metal people being so deep in their occult or whatever that their magic or their occult is in the same level of, say, people believing in Jesus or Allah or whatever. How on earth it's actually any better? For me, it's basically the same shit, just under different label. So obviously, my nihilist
I don't understand
inner
who believes
inner
anything
child is
blind
very
enough.
much
Not just
challenging
religion
those.
or magic, but without tangible proof, it makes no sense to me.
That's exactly the point, Freedom Frog. So we are very very much on the same page with this. So if people cannot laugh about their own beliefs and see why they are being ridiculed, I mean,
People
then
want
they
a
are
sense of
beyond
falsehood,
hope.
I guess. In a way, they find comfort in it, but it's like living a lie to be happy.
Very, very well put, Ritz. Sometimes I think people are like too desperate to, you know, desperate in the sense of like needing to find some kind of
いらっしゃい。きっと興
meaning
味をそ
in
そるもの
life.
がある。
You know, it's almost like, hey, I'm not ready to shop in the world of Jesus Christ because it's all bullshit. But suddenly these occult things or satanic things in the religious sense are suddenly fucking okay. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I also, play black metal and shit. And I am very serious about these things against religion and all. But how are these beliefs any better than
ま
the
たよろし
rest
く。
when there is nothing tangible, there is nothing concrete about these very topics? I mean, they're basically the same shit, just different brand. So yeah, I tend to be quite aggressive about those things, and of
For
course
me,
when
the
they,
guy sounded like a song about acceptance. There was a dark comfort in knowing it all ends the same. I don't
yeah,
know if it was.
well, yeah, there is that on that album too. You know, uh, in that sense, Death from Above is more personal than Nightside stuff
直江に知らせよう。
because uh, Annihilator's lyrics are a little bit more about me in a way, because it's so much, more nihilistic. But I mean, there are similar topics in Nightside's lyrics too. The approach is just a little bit different.
Don't get those people who go from Christianity to occult or witchcraft. Just going from one delusion to another and they might still be as.
Yes, Tia, that's exactly the point. That's exactly why I have written lyrics that are openly attacking people in these views. And I get some people will get angry at me because I'm writing about that stuff with my lyrics or dealing with those topics on the channel. But it's fine. I mean, it's their right to be angry at me because I've been challenging their, I don't know, can I call them core values? So I mean, it would be kind of weird if they didn't get upset when I'm openly challenging them and then, you know, laughing about them, you know, because in the end, if that's what is really, really important to them, and they wouldn't give a rat's ass about it, I guess it would be kind of weird. Okay, I kind of failed to start with this particular place now that this is all wanted and shit. I should not have run in. So, let me see what the time is. Yeah, I guess I will just head out of this place and come back later when I'm not wanted, because this wanted status makes all these areas much, much more challenging. And it's not just about challenging, it's also making this gameplay so much slower. So I think I'll come back another day.
And this is why Rauta is great, because he is grounded in reality.
Well, thanks for your words, Ritz. I really try to be grounded in reality, and when certain people, and sorry, this time I have to mention everybody's favorite um, musician, Satanic Warmaster, who is also a friend of mine. When people like him, I think he did this at least once. When they're like, "Hey, but you also consider, you know, science like religion, so you're not better than that, and your science also kind of sucks because you're doing this and that." Like, I'm like, if you consider science as religion, then you have totally failed to understand what science is all about. So science is not magical in the sense of like, hey, this will be the ultimate thing. Just believe in one truth and no truth whatsoever. But the thing with they miss when they're talking about science and try to compare it to religion is, well, science is self-correcting. So if there are mistakes, science will like, okay, we'll change the perspective, because if this and that cannot be proven, or something is proven that it's not actually factual, we just call out the shit
Science
and
is
change.
objective also.
yes, science is objective, which is very, very important for people to understand.
Science
Science
should be the only religion.
science doesn't give a fuck about feelings. That's also a very important thing for people to understand. And science doesn't care about being believed in. And you know, because it's self-correcting. I mean, so, let's take a Bible for instance. If Bible says, "Hey, you should believe in Jesus," you know, in order to be able to eligible for salvation or whatever, you know, that's just a belief. That's when you're just like, okay, I decide to believe in this or that because it will make my life better. Okay, fine, whatever suits you, but I can call it bullshit. But science is like, okay, we found this evidence that, for example, this and that theory doesn't hold water. It's not truth. So we'll scrap it. And there is no holy book like, okay, fuck, we cannot change that because it's said in this fucking holy book. There is no fucking holy book in science. So people, when they're trying to put science into the box of religion, I mean, they just don't fucking understand science, and that's even sadder than the very fact that they are trying to call it, you know, a religion. So I kind of a pity to people who are so dumb that they don't understand what science is. But hey, not everybody is equally qualified in this life. So there is that. And also what is usually funny is that people who are like criticizing science and saying like, hey, your science is not really doing any better than any of the other religions. And I'm like,
We are not equal.
we are not equal. There is a song about that too. But I mean, when people are saying like, "Hey, science is just a religion anyway," and I'm like, but at least you're using science's products to make this comment. So when you're making this comment uh, with your computer or smartphone, you're actually very, very much using the accomplishments of science to make that point that science did no good.
I am Tyler rolling on the floor laughing.
So I'm like there's so much irony when people are using science's accomplishments to make their point. And I'm like, okay, there you lost it. You're already proven me that you're using science's tools to
Some people
say
in
science
town
is
are
not
gloomy, so you just have
working.
to be like, whatever helps you sleep at night, lol.
Yeah, Rich, that's exactly true. Now, unfortunately, we have this really, really great conversation going on with your great commentary and good questions and all. I would love to go on about it today as well because, like I said, you're making really good points here, and we're having interesting comments here. But Jerry Boy has to go to bed. I'm just making some things on my map here, and unfortunately, then I have to go to bed because work awaits.
Late night, everyone.
So there is that. But I wish you everybody good night or good day wherever you are, and most likely going to be
I
streaming
have to wake up
tomorrow
in 5 hours too.
again. 5 hours, Black Widow.
Night.
That's crazy. Try to get
Night.
8 hours, and you will be happier person. Anyway, good night, you
Take
people,
care,
and
everyone.
hopefully catching you later. Probably streaming tomorrow again, as I said. So maybe I'll see you then. Now, off you go, people, and make all good questions even more for the next stream. Now, off you go. Good night.